Okie dokie. Back with another play and explain. Switch to a new software, so hopefully everything goes well. Just keep it simple with the fast hold format. I think these are probably the most engaging. Here right off the bat, some action, four betting with the jacks, button, small blind. This hand is definitely strong enough to put in a four bet, and just looking to get stacks in. Kind of playing in the middle of the day. Um, so I expect the pool to be a little bit tougher. Fortunately, we get it in bad right off the bat. And we just lose. It is what it is. Yeah, kind of the middle of the day right now, so I don't expect the games here to be very good. Um, I always talk about how game selection is probably the most important factor to you being a profitable player. Being profitable is not really so much about how good you are, but it's about how good your opposition is, or rather how not good your opposition is. As well, factors like the rake really come into account, and honestly, I would say that your skill as a player is probably the third most important thing to being profitable. Play good games, play in games with as cheap rake as you can get, and those should be a priority. Some of my clients are primarily live guys playing, um, like in certain parts of the US. And yeah, just some of the hand histories they send me are, absolutely incredible. I'm here just checking the flop with our entire range because we're multi-way, but I can start seeing a turn stab here. Checking actually is also acceptable, just it's never going to be too bad to check and trap a strong hand when you're out of position. But yeah, like a lot of live players feel that online's rigged just because, not because online actually is rigged, but just because online is probably 50 million times harder than live. Like the gap is so big that to an unstudied live player, I can totally see how it feels rigged. You basically, like if you're unstudied and you play online, you basically just like go online and you just immediately lose. Um, yeah, because the skill gap is so large. Probably just going to continue with this format. Um, yeah, I do think the future of poker very much does lie live. Um, I think there's still quite a bit of money to be made in poker, but I think the easiest money is definitely live these days. Here, I'm actually gonna go start with a larger C bet. Actually gonna roll. Okay, we roll low, so I'm gonna check it back. The thing is that if you play a large bet strategy on the flop, you always have to have checkbacks with every part of your range. And how you determine that is figuring out beforehand a certain percentage that you want to check back with each category of hands, and just playing those checkbacks. Here, folding on the right with the queen jack. Here, kind of nice, we flop trips, just starting off with a small continuation bet. If we get a call, I'm planning on doing a lot of checking on the turn, just because we have the board so locked up, and it's always good to check some really nutted hands over. Right, like if this guy has an overpair, if this guy has a really strong hand, he's going to put the money in anyways. Um, and it helps us to defend our checking range, always being mindful of that out of position. If you always bet when you have a strong hand, then you just never have a, what do you say, you just never have a strong hand when you check. Yeah, I'm just putting the money in here as a shove, trying to get value from overpairs, trying to get value from, Yeah, I mean mostly overpairs. If he has a flush, so be it. Just folding the sevens here to a 4-bet. Yeah. On the river, not gonna check trips again, but I would check a hand like queens again to bluff catch. And the reason for that is just because on the river, like we have trips, we have a really strong hand, and we don't need trips to check call. We don't need trips to bluff catch, so we can use our weakest overpairs. And just look at the side. He did in fact call us with queens, so got some nice value there. Yeah. One thing I say that will help your strategy a lot, or not really your strategy, but will help your execution a lot, is having a plan for what you're going to do ahead of time. Most players are very reactive. They see the turn come out, they see the river come out, or they face a bet, and then they start thinking about what they want to do. And if you play poker reactively, if you're always reacting to the card that comes out, if you're always reacting to your opponent's action, um, you're just at a severe disadvantage. Think ahead. Have a plan for what you're gonna do if a certain category of card comes out. Like if the board runs out in a flush, if the board runs out with a straight, if the board runs out with a board pair. Those are all really good ideas. Here, it's a bit of a tight fold, but I'm just gonna straight up fold this flush draw here. Like this guy's betting big. He probably like just like has a strong hand. Like I'm not a fan of check calling 5 high out of position. In theory, the hand is probably indifferent facing the large bet, but yeah, like I just don't, like not check calling 5 high out of position. That's basically it. But yeah. Like that's a good example with the 5-3 hand there, where like I have a certain plan of what I want to do against small c bet, and I have a certain plan against what I do versus large c bet. And versus large c bet, my plan is just get out of the way. Here with king jack, I'm not reacting to the 3-bet. I already have a plan. If button raise, this guy 3-bets, my plan is to just put in the 4-bet. Like this is pre-planned in advance. I'm not deciding whether I want to 4-bet this based off of the action. Yeah, and I'm planning in advance to fold to the jam if we do see it. Yeah, here just starting off small c bet. Same deal here. Small c bets on both. Just we have the overpair advantage on the right, and we also have the ace king Broadway advantage on the left. This is a really great board for us as the 4-better because villain in the small blind should almost never interact with this board at all. He should never have a 4. He should almost never have pocket 6s. So it's kind of like a blank board just came out where we get to press our overpair advantage. Just very, very, very good board for us. And we scoop all the EV just because of the board. Versus a limp. Just going to come along here in the form of an overlimp. I think this can definitely be fine, but I wouldn't overdo it. Yeah. Here, just check folding versus the larger bet with no heart. Not much we can do on that board. It's not our board. Villain has all the ace queen, king queen, aces, kings, sets, and we have none of that. So we're pretty cut off on the knees on that board. And when the board's just really bad for you like that, all you can do is just recognize it and give the pot up. Your job is to fight for pots in situations that favor you and to get out of the way in situations that do not favor you. People, sometimes I get comments on my videos talking about why I don't play on Bodog anymore. Um, yeah, and the answer is twofold. It's one, the stakes here are a little bit too low for my normal grind. But it's also because like their site security isn't the best, and I think yeah, there's a little bit of cheating going on this site. Um, that's definitely not the case with every poker site. I think a lot of sites do a really good job. But yeah, it's not the case with Bodog. And I'm only playing these, I'm only playing here because of the fast pull format to make the videos, right? Like, like hands coming up very quick is good for us videos. Calling the 4-bet here with the ace jack, or sorry, the queen jack. Yeah, just cut off button. But when we completely whiff, we just have to let go. I know the bet's tiny. But it's just not our board. And like anytime the board comes ace high for the 4-better, like we're just kind of fucked. Jack 9 will be putting a 3-bet against either open. Decently suited, decently connected hand. Oh, my cat is on my desk. This is my cat. Cat. Always fun to just pick up a cat and chuck it to the side. Yeah, suited ace, gonna play. And 6-7 suited in the big blind, will be 3-betting. Again, a lot of people under 3-bet the big blind, just because the 3-bets are very unintuitive. Would have 3-bet against one player. Against two players, the hand gets a little bit worse, so we'll just place a call. Preferring to keep my squeeze range against two people isolated to just broadways. Not really sure what to make of this bet, but I'm not going to fold just yet. Like, having the pair on the board's a little bit too strong. We also have some backdoor potential. Probably will be letting it go, facing more action, but we'll see. Really interesting check back. I'm going to check and try to showdown, but I have some plans for if villain bets the river. If villain bets the river, potentially think about turning my hand into a check raise bluff. Just because once turn goes check check. Yeah, once turn goes check check, it's villain just like doesn't really have a flush ever. Because he would bet a flush. And that actually gives us the advantage. It's tiny bet. I don't really know what to make of this. Okay, I'll flick it in for a third pot. Sure, we're up against some thin value. Totally fine. Would have folded against larger. Yeah. Flicking it in against tiny bets is never going to be too bad. Half pot sizing here. There's many different approaches you could take on a board like this on the 2-4-4. You could take the half pot approach. You could take the 2/3, the 3/4 approach. You could take the 1/3 approach. Many, many, many different approaches that are all going to be fine, but it's not just about your bet size. It's about the entire range that goes with your bet size. And the important part is playing the rest of your range correctly in accordance with that size. Like, you can't just do the same thing and just pick a different size. As the size goes down, you have to balance your bluffs and value accordingly. And that can only be done off the table. Like, that can only be done working through a sim or looking at GTO Wizard. When you're a poker player in 2025, you're more of a data scientist than anything. Like, you're more of just like looking at big amounts of data and aggregating it out. Here I'm actually gonna start bluffing this hand. Could seem very intuitive to a lot of people, bluffing top pair, but I think this is a turn that we're short on bluffs, and we also just have a lot of value here. Like, we have a lot of potential value. We have the ace of hearts, we have the five of hearts, even the king of hearts, queen of hearts would be potentially good enough to value bet. And so turning top pair, I think, into a bluff there makes sense, just given how connected the board is, and how low top pair is in our range, given the context of the board, right? Because villain bet big on the flop, and so if we had a lot of like second pair, third pair, we might even fold there. And so when it comes that connected and that four flush, you know, like the top pair is just not that high. Like we're never floating a random non-heart high card hand. Okay. Turn this hand to a bluff because we have interaction with 6-7, and villain doesn't have 6-7 because he checks back. He checked back, but he is gonna want to have a 7 to call down against us. He's gonna want to have a 7 blocking our value range, and given that he checked back the flop and bet the turn this kind of weak size, I don't think he's very strong. Like if he had a set or a straight, he would have bet the flop, and so he's checking back flop and just like stabbing pot and stabbing turn into this like kind of, you know, like weakish size, and you know that's just not that strong. Checking the flop back here, we are using a big bet strategy on the flop, which requires some checking back. But if you were playing a small bet strategy, you could just bet, and it's not a big deal. So check down to the river, and I will just go for the value bet here. Yeah, with the sevens head, not this one like the last one, where I turned the sevens into a raised bluff. You always want to have interaction around the nuts when you're doing a big bluff like that, because even if villain doesn't have the nuts in his range, he's gonna want to call you down with hands that block the nuts. And so, in a way, like, even if you don't block villain's nuts directly, you're blocking villain's hands, which block your nuts. And the end result is the same, where you just want to have interaction around the nutted part of the board. I know there was a lot of back and forth, and that's probably... I'm not going to pretend like I explained it perfectly, but yeah, if that doesn't make sense to anyone watching, you can ask me in the comments. Poker is a hard game. It is not a easy game by any means. I'll flick this in for min raise, but honestly, like versus 100 the gun, it might even be a fold. Check it here. Gonna peel here with the nut flush draw backdoor. If we only call with a pair on the left here, we're gonna be overfolding. Taking a small stab facing a turn, bet, and just hoping to take it down. Yeah, once it checks down to the river, I'm gonna just call. I'm not too optimistic about this. I think we'll see like kings or queens or jacks a lot. Oh wow, okay. Believe it or not, King 2 actually defends sometime against min raise when it's one person, but with a second player in the pot, we actually have to tighten up. A lot of people have this backwards where they think that with more people you have to loosen up because you get better pot odds. But the truth is you actually have to tighten up with more people because yes, you're getting better pot odds, but you never just like playing a shit like raggedy hand like King 2 just gets much worse when there's more opponents involved. Like you get cooler much more often, you get counterfeit much more often, and that actually outweighs any benefit you get from the better pot odds. But yeah, even during the middle of the day, like today, like still seeing a lot of mistakes, like people opening 3.5 big blinds, for example. Um, I would say that this pool is still very solidly beatable, but if you're beating this pool, you're probably better off playing many other games. Going to find a barrel here. Um, I like that we have an overcard to the board. I like that we have a club blocking potential club draws. Ideally, we want to block a king, but if you really think about it, the ranges are so wide where it's like kind of hard to block a king. Like you can make an argument that any hand blocks a king. Um, but yeah, after the clubs break out, I'm going to just give up. I would like to bluff a hand that contains some sort of 6 or some sort of 9, or has no club at the very least. Hmm. Okay, so face a 4-bet here. Normally this would be a fold, but given that we're 200 big blinds deep, calling these speculative hands becomes a little bit better. So I'm going to peel. Definitely, definitely speculative. Ooh, okay. Open ender. Interesting. Might raise the flop depending on his bet size. But not against this. I think this is a little bit too big. Interesting. I expect to face a lot of double barrels here. And if we face a double barrel, I'm just gonna fold. Yeah, unfortunate. Really unfortunate. Yeah, this is why being out of position sucks. Like you kind of just have to fold a chunk of equity. Like you don't guarantee yourself a river. Sucks. Raising the flop, I think, for a small size could have been totally fine too, but yeah. Check this one over to the button and kind of see what he does. What I would ideally like to see is for this guy to stab, this guy to like call, and then I could shove over the two of them. That's what I would ideally like to see. I really don't want to see this guy check back. Sure. Well, this guy shoves. I'm not folding the overpair. Maybe he has a better overpair, but you know, it is what it is. When the SPR is this low, you can't really get away. What's the point of calling jacks pre-flop if you're just gonna fold the overpair? Like, you might as well fold pre. Yeah. One thing I will say to people is that poker is a frequency game, and people will surprise you. It's very unhelpful to say things like, oh, this is never a bluff, or this is always aces, or this is like, when you're using absolute terms, like never and always, nothing is never and nothing is always. You can say something is almost always aces, you can say it's aces a lot of the time, um, but you don't know that it's aces all the time. And I see this especially in like beginner players where I wouldn't even say beginner players. I say this in people who haven't done a lot of sim work where they think they understand thinking and probability, but they don't. and they're still trying to put people on exact hands. It's like, oh, this guy has top set, or this guy has ace king, or this guy has aces, and that's very, very, very unhelpful. Like if you find yourself thinking that way, your growth as a player is going to be forever stunted until you stop thinking that way. Like, for example, like in the Jack's hand, it was very easy for me to say, like, oh, this guy always has an overpair, so I'm going to fold. But, based on the pot odds, I only need him to have a not overpair 20, 30%. Um, that's not that high of a number. That's not that high of a number. You can go with a half pot strategy on this board. I'm choosing to use half pot. You could also use 1/3. You could also use larger. But whatever strategy you pick, you have to build the rest of your range around it. Like, you have to know what your draws are doing, what your error is doing, what your value is doing, how often you're checking back. And if you don't have that plan in mind, then you're just guessing. And if you're just guessing, then you're going to be wrong. Here, big bet strategy on the ace king 3. Mostly betting this hand and sometimes checking it back. But you could also just like close your eyes and bet small here. Like, both would be fine. Now, a lot of people on the turn here would just check this thinking that they have a pair, but think about the range that he calls with. When he calls the flop against this big bet, does he ever call a hand worse than a 10? Does he ever call like pocket eights for this big bet? No. So when he calls the big bet, he just has an ace or a king. And so your 10, even though it might look like a pair, actually has 0 showdown value. You're better off thinking about it as like a two pair blocker, like a blocker to ace 10 and like a blocker to the straight. Right? Like, and it might seem quick to a lot of you people that like I'm making that conclusion like right off the bat, but that's because I have that plan in mind. Like, I've already thought like, hey, on on um on a Broadway turn, a Broadway pairing turn like a 10 or a jack, I'm going to continue barreling. So that plan is already in mind. When the board comes, I simply have to react. I simply have to like do the plan instead of trying to figure out what the plan is. Yeah, so my takeaway for you guys in this video would just be, have a plan. And don't get me wrong, like, that's not a simple thing to do. It's fucking hard to have a plan. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of study. But if you're serious about getting better at poker, then yeah, you need a plan. And the plan doesn't have to be complicated, but it has to be there. It's better to have like a not great plan that you perform perfectly than to just like have no plan and try to just like like guess as good as you can. Like, it's better to perform like a kind of okay plan well than to just like, I guess, than it is to try to like do a really good plan poorly, right? Like, take a simple, easily executable plan and just like do it well, but don't overcomplicate it, because if you overcomplicate it, you're going to end up executing poorly. And that is my takeaway for y'all today. Oh god, I hope this is still recording. Sure, I'll check this down. Hopefully we're just good against King 8. Nope, he has 2 pair. We'll be calling this against mid-raise, folding against every other size. Okay, so coming up to 30 minutes, I think I'm gonna play maybe one more hand. And then call it a couple more hands. It looks like the pool is slowing down a little bit as well. Yeah, you know what? Probably a good time to cut it. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see y'all next week.